Good afternoon to everybody in attendance, also everybody watching on the live stream. I just want to thank everybody for joining us for this conversation. With Nation in Conversation, we try to discuss topics and create content that's justifiable and really of concern within the agricultural sector. My name is Francois Redlinghuis. I'm the marketing manager at Senves, and we really hope that you enjoyed the discussions that we've had up until this point. And then as we enter our last discussion, where we will specifically focus on the value chain of the sheep industry within the Cape Province as a whole, we really hope that you find value with the conversation and find value from our speakers that we've had here. And we really wish you, as this is our last session for Nation in Conversation at Nampo Cape, we wish you safe travels back home for everybody that's here. And then also we invite you to Nampo Botawil next year. We will also continue the discussion at Nation in Conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francois. A warm welcome from me as well. Annelie Hutting, I'll be your facilitator today. There's an icy wind in the air, but here ons is so 'n bietjie beskik. Wees gemaklik saam met ons begin hierdie gesprek. I'd like to introduce you to our panelists today. I'm going to start on that side. Minister of Agriculture for Western Cape, Minister Ivan Meyer, welcome. Thank you for your participation. Next to him, Richard Krieger, a producer from Boontjieskraal in Caledon. I don't know how you say that in English, but yes, it's there. Isak Staats, Algemene Bestuurder, General Manager of the Wool and Mohair Division from BKB. Thank you. Philip Oosthuizen from the Red Meat Industry Services. And on my left here, Stephen van Heesteen, former Managing Director of KLK, Karakoel en Lewende Hawe Koöperasie. Oudtyds. Maar baie dankie vir julle almal se deelname. We're going to switch the conversation from English to Afrikaans relatively easily. I know a language is not just a method of communication, it's a way of reaching out and connecting with each other. So I hope for a lively discussion. And I'm going to start off with you, Minister Meyer. If you can give us some insights into the economic significance of the sheep industry and its value chain in the Western Cape.
No, thank you, and good afternoon to the listeners. I think the first thing to acknowledge is that the Western Cape is 20% of commercial agriculture in South Africa. It is the biggest commercial agriculture in South Africa. It is also about 7,000 commercial farmers. And we have seen the results from Stats SA confirming that commercial agriculture in the Western Cape contributes 64.4 billion rand in revenue. So that's the first economic reality. The second economic reality is very significant, in that is that 37% of gross value add from agriculture is on the farm. That's also for us very significant. And then 12% of the total sheep population in South Africa, total sheep population in South Africa is about 18 million, and 12% of that comes from the Western Cape. So this is a healthy industry, it's a significant industry, and we really appreciate it. And I want to thank our sheep farmers, because we are now in an area here in the Overberg, and we know people are talking about the Overberg lam. But not only here, they talk about the Karoo lam. So I'm in a good company, both here in the Karoo, as well as here in Overberg.
Thank you. I want to come to you next, Stephen. If you could perhaps give us just an overview of the value chain from primary production to processing, verwerking, and then all the way through to value adding, where we know a lot of the economic value is unlocked.
I can make it very simple only. If you take the value chain logically, it starts with the farmer, producer. It will go to an abattoir, which will convert a live animal into a carcass. From there, it will go into a wholesaler or retailer for further processing. And then it will end up with the final consumer. The interesting part is, where do they make money in the value chain? And if you look at a farmer, and some might not like the answer or the comment, But if you take sheep or lamb, it does make up about 52% of the consumer value. In other words, the producer price is roughly about 50%. So if you take all the cuts that you find in a retail store and you put them back together, and you add that, you take out VAT, you'll come to roughly about 50%. If you look at the abattoir business is in trouble. But if you look at the abattoir, because of capacity utilization, in South Africa, I had some stats here. In South Africa, about 12 years ago, we had 547 sheep abattoirs. Today, 226. The Northern Cape, where KLK is, we had also half of it, 56 in 2010, and today we have 26 abattoirs. So there's a dramatic drop in abattoir owners or abattoirs that are operational. So wat gebeur, die deurset, en as jy kyk na die getalle wat geslag is, jy kyk na die droogte wat oor afgelope jare, dan is daar in die Noord-Kaap, as ek spesifiek vat van waar ons is, in die Noord-Kaap het ons in 2014-15 net oor die 2 miljoen kleinvee, lam en bees en bok geslag. Toe is daar in 2020 is daar 'n dramatiese daling geweest, met omtrent 6 en toe nou weer. So ons is af oor die afgelope 8 jaar met omtrent 1 miljoen slaggetalle per jaar. Dit beteken die kapasiteitsbenutting in die abattoirbedryf is onder druk. En dan 'n laaste opmerking, waar word die geld gemaak in die ketting? As jy kyk na die abattoirbedryf, ek sien nou die produsent kry 52% of 50% van die verbruiker se rand. Dis van die beter verhoudings in die landbousektor. Maar as jy kyk na die abattoirbesigheid, jou bruto winspersentasie is rolweg 12-14%. Jou groothandel wat die verspreiding doen, jy moet dit nou van die abattoir af kry by die groothandel, kleinhandel. Jou groothandel se marge is in die omgewing van omtrent 9% bruto winsmarge. Hy doen die kleiner verpakking en versprei aan die retail. So hy kom by die kleinhandel uit. En die geld word voorgemaak in die ketting. En ek dink dis een van die strukturele probleme wat ons ondervind met die vleisbesigheid, veral met skaap. So in die voorkant is dit tussen 28 en 35%. So kom ons sê 28% GP. So as jy kyk na dit, dis die bruto waarde wat hulle byvoeg. So die verbruiker betaal daardie kostestruktuur. So ons het 'n kostestruktuur, ons het 'n waardestruktuur, dit hang af waar die waarde bygevoeg word, gewoonlik reg voor. So ons is in die moeilikheid as jy daarna kyk as 'n abattoirbesigheid. En dis waar die oplossing heel waarskynlik uitgedink moet word. Dan moet ons na verskillende markte kyk. Ons sal nou net daarby kom, maar dankie.
As ons nou praat oor markte, and Richard, I want to come to you as a producer. You've got to know what the market looks like. What are the tendencies looking like in terms of the demand for sheep, for meat?
Well, demand, in my opinion, has declined, and it's coupled to the economy. Through COVID and those periods, we were still seeing fairly good consumption figures and relative demand, and we've seen a wash through of the effect of COVID and the economy coming through now with producer prices being approximately 15 to 20% lower than they were a year ago this time. So the demand has declined, and obviously as a producer, we're asking and wondering where the other opportunities to push up producer prices. We also see a lot as producers price fluctuations from week to week, where these fluctuations can be 6 to 8 rand, and your marketing can fall within a period, but because they're very, very rigid, I would say, specifications on carcass weights and size, you can't carry the stock forever. There's a marketing season, and you have to use and utilize the opportunities within that marketing season that you have, depending on your system and lambing intervals and periods. I think that's in short. Lamb has become a niche product, And I think we're seeing that from a consumer's point of view.
Yeah, I mean, with food inflation, a lot of consumers are under pressure. Do you think that has the biggest impact? Because looking at various commodities, consumer education about what they're buying plays a big role in terms of determining how they feel and think about a certain product and whether that is top of mind when they go shopping.
It's definitely, and I think we're moving into an era that consumers want to know where their product came from. They want to know that animal husbandry was done in a way that it was responsible, humane conditions. They want to trace the products that they're consuming back to point of origin. We need to almost sell the story along with the product.
Yeah.
This is a product of origin. Minister spoke about Overberg lamb, Karoo lamb. That's where it starts. We're going to have to look at traceability. Traceability not only from an export perspective, but traceability back to the consumer on a local market, because you have to sell the story. And we can get into some of the certification programs now, and I think we'll explore that going forward. But definitely consumers want to know where it's coming from. Stephen also made the comment about we wouldn't be happy to hear the percentage of what we take home as producers being 52%. Producers are somewhat used to that, where a loaf of bread, for example, would be 17% is the producer's market share there. There's not a lot of processing that can be done on a lamb carcass as it would be beef or pork or some of the other competing meat sources as it would be protein sources. And we've definitely seen, and my observation is that the retail is taking up a greater percentage of profit and margin in the last while. Retailers have come under pressure. And this is pushed back onto the abattoirs that Stephen, I think, also alluded to, where margins have come under pressure at abattoir level, and obviously because of the volumes as well. And it's feeding back and pushing back to the producer at the bottom of the cycle. If we look at meat prices 10 years ago, wool prices, which are what the two products that we produce off the live animal, meat and wool has not kept trend with inflation over a period of time. This is a concern. It's a concern about the expansion of the industry. It's a concern about soos die mooi Afrikaanse woord daarvoor is die koste-knyptang, which is the price squeeze that producers at the start of this chain are experiencing, and it's of concern.
Just coming to you, Philip, you've from the red meat industry services perspective, you've got an overview of different meat products and sort of market trends and what the fluctuations are. With this price squeeze, is that unique to the sheep industry? Do we see that to the same levels everywhere?
I see to a certain extent, yes. So the price squeeze is an economic factor that we have to take into consideration. However, I think there's a lot of factors that need to be taken into consideration. It's not a simple thing to do. However, we see it's exactly the same sheep industry, the beef industry, whatever it might be. And everybody always refers to the consumer and what the consumer wants. And we can have a whole discussion of what the consumer actually is and how we get that information and try to push that through the value chain from a consumer perspective down to or backwards to the primary producer. But yes, if you look at just normal inflation and the cost of inputs, we just had a discussion of sheep feedlots as well. I mean, you don't see as many sheep feedlots as in the beef industry. Well, in certain other provinces, we've seen a lot of sheep feedlots actually coming alive again, like a lot of them, 20, 30,000 capacity feedlots. I know about 8 of them that originated the past 3 to 4 months. So that's quite a good thing to see. However, if you look at their business model from a cost squeeze perspective, it's not only with regards to the segment of the red meat value chain, with regards to the feedlot itself and looking at economics itself. It's guys that looks at the entire value chain, and they differentiate their product and their risk, mitigate their risk throughout the value chain. And I think that might be the thing that we need to have a look at. If you invest money, and I mean, raising capital is always a big concern, especially for the livestock industry. If you look at it from a value chain perspective, and the guys that are actually opening the sheep feedlots is venture capital guys. So they look at it from a investment point of view. If you look at it from an investment point of view, the risk is the major thing that you have to mitigate in some sort of a way. And if you look at the red meat value chain as a whole, that might be some of the difficult questions to answer. Is where is the profit margins? However, it doesn't really matter where the profit margins are if you have the entire red meat value chain with regards to integration between the different segments of the value chain. So I think that's a new way of maybe thinking of it. But somebody only taking on primary production or feedlot or abattoir, it becomes quite difficult to be profitable. And then it's economies of scale and so forth. So I think the viewpoint should be value chain, and how do we see the systems running through the value chain, speaking about traceability, quality control, and so forth. And I think that might be a new way of looking at it.
Isak, just to come to you, looking at the numbers, sheep farmers in the West and in the Northern Cape, do we have stats on how many of those are role players in the entire value chain, and how many of those are limited to that price squeeze as a primary producer?
I would say very few of them are, very few of them are involved in the entire value chain. It's just not the nature of the industry at the moment. More and more of them are seeing the possibilities of becoming involved, and we are actually now in the process of introducing them to their customers, which, because of the way that the industry is structured over the years, there are too many people between a wool farmer or a meat farmer and his customers. We reckon up to 17 people can be, especially in the wool value chain, between a primary producer and his customer in the end. So I don't think it will ever be possible for them to become that involved like we can with the meat industry in wool, but you can definitely start producing for a customer's need in the future.
We were talking about traceability a little bit earlier, and foot and mouth had a massive impact on all livestock producers in South Africa over the last while. So traceability, biosecurity, product quality from production all the way through the value chain, food safety, until it reaches the consumer. That's a major concern for people globally. And we see a lot of technology playing a role in ensuring that quality throughout the value chain. What does that look like in South Africa? Because biosecurity still seems to be a challenge. And then the knock-on effects of that, traceability, is still something we're building up.
So maybe I can try this one and have a stab from a producer's point of view, because the value chain really starts at the producer. I think farmers are being lax about the necessity and the control of biosecurity on farm level. We see farmers go to auctions, buy a ram, he comes back to the farm, he drops that ram within his flock. He should be isolating that animal and using germ measures, etc., to control the spread of on his own clothing and shoes. So biosecurity is important, and I think it's something that needs to be looked at. Along with that, we have to also mention veterinary services in this country, where the international norm is between about 400 to 600 vets per million people. We're sitting at a level of 40 to 60 vets on a million people. So we're totally under-resourced when it comes to veterinary services.
And under-resourced when it comes to vaccines. We know the challenges there as well.
Well, honest to put, bioservices has got a problem in producing vaccines. And we'll get to some of the diseases maybe a bit later. I don't want to focus on that. But biosecurity is extremely important. The control of diseases, foot and mouth, etc. If we are better capacitated with vets in this country, I think would have been better. It's really dealt a blow to industry. We're still seeing in other sectors protein production, avian flu as well, the outbreaks of that, and that's hot in the media at the moment. But foot and mouth disease certainly dealt a blow to both the wool segment of our production and the meat sector. Through bilateral agreements, we've been able to open certain export markets, but they're under the bilateral agreements, because we've had a foot and mouth status since, I think, 2019, if I'm not mistaken. And that's really dealt a blow to the industry, where we battled to export wool. It affected wool prices, finding a buyer for that wool, and agreements to move that wool into countries that also farm with livestock, and that foot and mouth contamination risk they weren't prepared to carry at times. And I think from the biosecurity point of view, if farmers take this seriously and the role players in government take the need for that seriously, it's certainly something that we can overcome. We've seen in other countries them overcoming that. And there are various diseases, and maybe one or two I'd like to mention is Aussie rotten foot, highly contagious. It poses a threat to the industry, sheep industry in the Western Cape. And another one is Jones disease, which is Jones disease is a declarable disease, and the control measures and things that have been put in place in South Africa are limiting and restrictive, that it's not encouraging the use of vaccines to counter the disease. We only have to look at the Australian model where Gud Air is deregistered as a high-scale vaccine and is available at your agricultural business off the shelf. You don't need to go through a protocol where you have to have vet inspection authority, a prescription for that. You then consider contamination where trucks have to be sealed and unsealed, limited animal movement, and it's really it's an inhibitor, and it poses a massive threat to the industry.
Just anecdotally, Gary Forster, a producer who was on our earlier panel this morning talking about energy, he's mainly a seed, potato, maize and beef farmer, but he used to have sheep. And he said to me, very much in his area, very much like potatoes, sheep spend their entire life trying to die. So I think for many consumers, they're not quite aware of the challenges with sheep production. I want to come back to genetics and breeding in just a moment, but just to pause briefly while we're talking about biosecurity and exporting. Minister Mayer, if you can talk to us perhaps about live exports. I read a statistic somewhere that in the last 50 years, export of live animals globally has more than doubled. What does the market look like in South Africa? Is there potential for growth in that sphere?
Absolutely, yes. I remember about 2 years ago, due to the geopolitical conflict between Iran and Qatar, both Muslim countries. Iran was traditionally responsible for exporting livestock to specifically Qatar. And because of the conflict between them, the government of Qatar sent 3 state vets to us in Elsenburg in the Western Cape. We took them to 3 EU-certified halal abattoirs because they wanted to see in terms of that. We see on an annual basis there's always this tension between the SPCA and the livestock industry, particularly in the Eastern Cape with this shipping of the livestock to the Middle East in particular. And I think there is now, following BRICS, we have seen also a significant increase in the livestock industry exports. I do think there's a significant potential for market access, in particularly the export industry. To give you a few numbers, we have seen here in the Western Cape, particularly generally veterinary services products, it's a turnover of 5.3 billion rand, just in terms of monthly applications for veterinary export products. At our veterinary export certification office, we get monthly 2,600 applications. So that tells me it is growing. It tells me there's a global market for this, and I think we've got some great farmers. I know of one agri-processing plant in the West Coast, where the agri-processing plant is sourcing 1,300 farms across South Africa for their particular agri-processing, the meat processing. What they have also done, they went around the world to look for, now that you talked about traceability, they looked around the world, where is the best biosecurity and traceability? And they found it in New Zealand and in Australia, and they implemented that system in the West Coast from the moment the sheep, the carcass, enters the processing plant until the end, because it's, soos hulle in Afrikaans sê, jy is op een hak van die daar kom deur die hele systeem en jy kan presies sien wat gebeur, alles met daardie betrokkenskap. I think that is significant. Your answer directly, is there a potential for exports? Absolutely yes. Africa is 1 billion people. 50% of South Africa's primary agriculture goes on the African continent, and Africa are meat eaters. And I think in Europe we also see great potential for this. So sheep farmers, difficult situation because they came out of a severe drought for 8 years, not easy for a farmer. Immediately after that, they went into COVID, not easy for farmers. Immediately after that, the Ukraine-Russia war, not easy for farmers. And now the energy crisis, the subject matter of your previous discussion, not easy. But one thing is clear, our farmers are resilient, our farmers are in demand, and our farmers are now have to look more and more at biosecurity. I read the report of Minister Toko Dudisa. As you know, she appointed a task team to look into biosecurity. The short of that version is biosecurity regulatory framework in South Africa has totally collapsed. And as the Minister for Agriculture in this province, I'm not going to allow that to happen in this province, because we have now declared, on the 28th of March, I went to Parliament in the Western Cape, and because what I see happening in the national geopolitical landscape, I've declared September a provincial veterinary services week to give more attention to the livestock industry, to the veterinary services, the issues that you spoke about, vaccination, all of that stuff. I want to make sure that we protect our industry, that we protect our farmers, and that we focus more on this, because we are now moving towards what we call One Health. That's animal health and health of people. And people, for me, primary concern is the health of the animal, but also the health of people, meat safety.
When we talk about diseases, biosecurity, traceability, all of this, looking at the future and technology, the role technology can play, we look at genetics and breeding. That's a significant answer to a lot of the challenges. Stephen, maybe you can tell us where we are in terms of access to good genetics, our breeder programs. What does the situation look like, and what are the challenges there?
I think Richard should answer that, being a farmer, but my contribution would be our farmers are extensive. They farm extensively, but they are working intensively. Okay. Met ander woorde, dit is die boerderypraktyke. Skaapboerdery is 'n wiskunde, is 'n syferspel. Het jy een keer 'n jaar 'n lammeroes of jy meer gereeld. So ek dink dis van die boerderypraktyke wat in plek sal moet kom. Tegnologie is beskikbaar en word baie wyd aangewend. So ek dink daar is 'n groot fokus aan die produsente kant met dit. Ek wil net, as ek mag, net teruggaan na wat hulle almal eintlik gesê het, maar wat Richard en Philip gesê het. Hier is 'n baie komplekse vleisstruktuur ketting. Ek noem dit die vleisketting. En Richard se opmerking is baie relevant. As jy gaan kyk in die markplek, toe jy die vraag vra oor die verbruiker. As jy gaan kyk in die markplek en jy gaan kyk in die retail winkel, in Claremont in 'n retailer se winkel, jy gaan vra watter hoeveelheid van skaapvleis eindig op die rak. In jou mandjie van skaap, bees, hoender, vark, wat is die persentasie? Skaap is 13%, 15%. Sekere slaghuise in Kimberley ensovoorts dalk 18%. So die waarde, nie volume nie, maar die waarde van sy verkope is 15% skaap. Die res is lam en bees. So ek wil net daai punt los is. Gaan kyk die shelf space. If you look at shelf space, where do you find it? It's half a meter in a retail store. Sheep, the rest, lamb and the rest. So dis een van die uitdagings wat dit. En die ander punt wat ek wil maak is, wat baie belangrik is in hierdie vleiskettingstruktuur, is dat ek was bevoorreg, ek weet hoe die hoenderbedryf lyk. Ek noem dit 'n ketting. Jy plaas hoenders, jy groei hulle, jy sit hulle deur die abattoir en jy slag hulle en jy bemark hulle. Bees, jy 'n voerkraal en hulle beheer oor die voerkraal. So die bees voerkraalprodusente beheer 80% van bees in Suid-Afrika word dit voerkraal uitverkoop en dit word beheer. So dit gaan van 'n voerkraal, hy koop aan, hy sit in 'n voerkraal, hy kan daai ketting balanseer. Dis eintlik my punt. So wat hulle oopdraai vir die markplek voor, hulle kan die mark terugtrek in sy abattoir, in sy voerkraal. Skaap is nie so nie. Dis die uitdaging wat ons het. Skaap is gefragmenteer en ons het vroeër daarna verwys. So jy het 'n produsent, hy besit nie 'n abattoir nie. Jou vraag van vroeër. Ja. Dis vir ons die uitdaging in die vleisstruktuur. So wat ons daar moet doen, ek het 'n paar idees, maar minister het verwys na Nieu-Seeland en Australië. Ek dink daar lê deel van die oplossing in terme van jou abattoirbedryf. So tussen 'n produsent, as jy dink aan die voelkraal, beesvoelkrale, jy dink aan die hoender, hulle beheer van die roumateriaal of van die produksieproses af tot by die verbruiker. In skaap kan ons dit nie doen nie. So ons moet 'n model vind in die middel, sodat tussen die produsent en uiteindelik die verbruiker dit korter is. Ons het nou die situasie, wat hy nou verwys het, 'n kleinhandelgroep wat nou inkoop in die verwerkingsaanleg. Maar daai verwerkingsaanleg se volume, minister, is meer bees en ander produk as wat dit skaap is. Maar skaap is deel van die mandjie en ek het nou reeds daarna verwys. Ekskuus.
Yeah, I think if I can make 2 points quickly, that the BFAP baseline report projects that beef will grow consumption 8%, chicken 16%, sheep 1%, pork 28%, and eggs 12%. The per capita usage of beef is about 13 kilograms per capita. Chicken runs almost at 40. Sheep meat as low as about 2.5 kilos per capita usage. With eggs running at about 7 kilos. So consumers are eating more eggs than they're eating sheep meat, and I think we spoke about the product being niche product, etc.
It's a worrying picture for producers.
It is. It is a high-value protein product, and I think the producers of that, we know that. But so long as we can move our product, that's the important thing. Concerning is the Inspectorate Services, and I'd like to share this with you. The head of that, Dr. Graham Lesh, retired at the end of the month. We foresee that there's going to be problems with inspection services, both controlling the BLNS import of slaughter of livestock from neighboring states and the control thereof, and issuing permits. So it's sad for me to share today. I've just received an SMS from abattoir here in Bredasdorp that had a shipment destined for the east. The inspection was done at 10 o'clock in the morning. The permit wasn't issued in time, and we missed the 2 o'clock flight, resulting in that shipment of lambs not being able to go out the country. These things need to happen in real time as fast as possible. Omdat jy met 'n bederfbare produk, die winkel raak leeftyd, soek hulle aan die kant by die retail en kleinhandelwinkel. We can't lose life. Ons kan nie hier raaklewe verloor nie.
Yeah.
Ons moet dit aan die kant verloor, as jy hoor wat ek sê.
Yeah. But getting those efficiencies in place, once again, it seems to me like that's out of the hand of the producers.
And really, this is the role of government, to ensure that the permit systems are in place, that there's a new head of inspection services gets appointed, and that those are efficient. Onderstepoort will have to take in more students, and we'll have to get more vets. If we move on to the breeding question, then I think the producers are well positioned to increase the kilograms produced per hectare through various ways, accelerated breeding programs, the use of technologies, be it laparoscopic AI and artificial insemination, the spread of proven genetics with regards to length of wool micron, and we haven't really touched on the wool segment. And then increasing the growth potential in the kilograms that are produced by growing out bigger, faster growing, more efficient carcasses, etc. A lot of breeders registered across the country, great systems in place that measure the production value and the breeding value of the individuals, that producers can go to an auction, have a well-documented catalogue that gives them a variety of options and choices, and then obviously looking at the animal, the body conformation and that he feels that he needs, along with the production figures, to improve his own flock. And I think producers are well positioned to do that. I think we see a lot of groups coming from overseas countries, farmers interested in our agricultural practices. We do have an extensive production area insofar as the Karoo, etc. And here in the Overberg and other higher rainfall areas, we tend to have intensive livestock operations on sheep, and we're very well positioned, and our breeding and our production figures are superior in the world. We're certainly doing very well with regards to that.
Okay, great. Isak, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the wool industry in South Africa. Some of the major challenges with growth and sustainability that we need to overcome in the next year or two.
So I think the first thing is that wool is not the major income of a sheep farm anymore. It's about 20 to 40%, depending on the breed that you work with. The challenge is that the good news is that it's an export industry, so all of it gets earned in dollars, so that is great. But the bad news is that it's an export industry, so all of it, and most of it gets sent to China, so we've got this huge concentration risk sitting in one country. I think there are really nice opportunities. South Africa, we're not the biggest producer of wool in the world, Australia is, but we are highly recognized as the world's leading producer of certified wool. Wool that's got a traceability, that's got a story behind it, all the things that we know that needs to be done in a modern marketing world. So, and that's where we need to concentrate, on selling our wool in our little niche part of the world. We don't have the finest wool in the world, but we've got a very highly sought after wool. I think the other nice thing about the wool industry is that the emerging farmer component of it is massive. We service about 49,000 emerging producers coming out of the Cisco and Transco, and there are huge opportunities for these guys to increase the income, their per family income in the world of wool. So and that just gets added on to the meat production that can come out of that area. So potential, we do have the farmers, we do have the potential, we do have the genetic material to make this a huge success. The markets are down, but I think there's nothing in the world that's selling at the moment that at the high prices that we would like. All agricultural commodities are struggling at the moment, so that will change. We need to be in the market when it happens.
So I want to come back to farmer development and involvement of smallholder farmers in the broader sheep industry in just a moment. But I want to come to you first, Philip, in terms of, we were talking about exports, and wool being largely export driven, also looking at our exports of our sheep and lamb meat. The regulatory framework in so many areas of agriculture is challenging. What are the challenges there, and the processes and conversations in place to expand our market share and to make that process easier?
I think it's quite a complex question. However, exports, whether it's beef or lamb or sheep or whatever we export, or wool, is the answer from various viewpoints. If you look at it, you say we've got a niche product, but you don't really get the premium that we should get on the niche product. However, if you have the export market, there's different exchange rates, we can get the premium. So that's a good thing, and then we can actually get the money that we're supposed to get. That's the one side from the economic point of view. The other side is, if we have a healthy export market, whether it's beef or lamb, it's an additional market that we have, and that will sort of help us with regards to the fluctuation in prices, especially on lamb, will stabilize those prices to a large extent, having an export market. So there's a massive economic contribution that it can have. We had discussions over the traceability, and everybody refers to traceability. Traceability is not the golden coin that will save everything. However, it is the best tool that we have to get to sort of control or manage all of the factors from a biosecurity point of view, from getting the small-scale farmers into the commercial value chain, to get the genetics into the small-scale farmers into the value chain, getting that through abattoirs or feedlots, abattoirs, and getting that meat ready for export. So traceability is really the golden thread throughout the value chain, and we don't have that. We've got portions of traceability like in the wool industry. The nice thing is there's already pockets of traceability all over the red meat value chain. So we are actively busy looking at that and looking at the technology solution. If we think that we're going to have one traceability system with a specific tag and a specific system, and we're going to force it on small-scale farmers, commercial farmers throughout the red meat value chain, we've tried that. It doesn't really work. It has to be a voluntary system. It has to be a value proposition for each and every segment throughout the value chain. So we're actively looking at tech solutions, and there's a lot of tech solutions that we're looking at to integrate systems. If you integrate systems, then or different systems throughout the value chain, there's already champions doing brilliant work throughout the value chain. So I think in quite a short period of time, we're going to have a version of a traceability system, an inclusive, mutually inclusive traceability system, which will address all of these factors, and having the ability for government as well to trace back with regards to disease control, foot and mouth disease. Foot and mouth disease in the cattle industry, however, If we lose our status, we can't export the wool as well. So it has a massive effect on all of this. So I think from an export point of view, there's a lot of opportunities. However, government has a massive role to play within that. So it's a willing buyer, willing seller, and that's from private industry or from private companies. However, the negotiations with regards to export protocols, that's 100% with government. However, how do we help government? Let's give them bullets to help win this fight with regards to exports, and a traceability system that works for everybody. That is what government needs. So we need to sort of strengthen their hands to help us to get those export protocols. If you look at Saudi Arabia that just opened up, it's just the first part of the negotiations that opened up. There's still a long list of requirements that we have to get through, such as the use of vaccinations. And if we vaccinate for foot and mouth disease, how do we control that? If we don't even have a traceability system, we've got a very good traceability system in the feedlot abattoir integration. However, what about on farm level? How do we connect that? So there's quite a lot of things that still needs to happen. I think we're in a very good position to actually making that happen at the moment, especially with the RMIS and the positioning of the red meat industry with a sort of a mutually inclusive platform such as RMIS, which is really, really, I think, one of the major shifts in the industry for the past 20 years, to say, let's look at it from a value chain perspective, and let's try to get all these puzzle pieces, and there's brilliant puzzle pieces with regards to data, and you're speaking about genetics and so forth, all of these things. We just need to have it on one platform, on some sort of a traceability system, and linking all of these, and we speak about fluctuations with regards to market prices and so forth. If we have a proper value chain and we have a proper traceability system, we can sort of have a look at when the quantities of animals actually going in the value chain. Maybe using feedlots to try and control that as the beef industry, having consistent supply. If you've got a consistent supply, if you've got a consistent price, and you have risk mitigation. So I think there's brilliant opportunities all over. We don't have our hands on everything, but I think the time is really good at the moment with all the platforms that we have in place, that we can actually work together and get this done.
And I think it's important to educate consumers that traceability is dis nie net 'n bemarkingsfoefie nie. It needs to tick all the boxes all the way along, like you said. But that's part of the education in it that still needs to happen. I want to come now to you, Mr. Ivan Meyer, to talk about rural economics, job creation, opportunities to involve communities in the value chain so that we have some level of growth. We're talking about successful emerging farmers in the wool space. What projects do you know about?
Well, the first thing is farmers farm within the geographical space of a municipality. The best thing anybody can do for agriculture, for farmers, is to have a well-run, professional, capable state at the local government level. When I talk to farmers and where there's problems, you can trace it back to a municipality that is not well run. So the first thing I'm asking the mayors in this province, and I've spoken to 30 mayors, I say the best thing you can do is to have a functional, well-run municipality, meaning a capable state. And that's why I had an agricultural municipal summit, because I want municipalities to service farmers. Farmers want extensions, they want permits, they want building plans approved. I said to them, I don't want my farmers to run from pillar to post in a municipality. I asked every mayor to appoint one single person to service the agricultural sector. Secondly, talking about what support we are giving to small-scale farmers and farmers in general, firstly, we have a very specific program with the commercial farmers in terms of mentoring and coaching to assist the small-scale farmers, and I want to thank them because they're doing an outstanding job. I don't want a small-scale farmer to be a small-scale farmer for 30 years. My mission is to see a farmer starting off sometimes as a subsistence farmer, then to a small-scale farmer, and then on a mentoring program to become a commercial farmer. And I want to thank our farmers, particularly here in the Western Cape, for helping and assisting us. And one way we do that, we sign agreements with the commodity organizations, for example, like the Red Meat organization. We sign an agreement as my department. Part of that agreement is support, training, technical advice, and mentoring to the small-scale farmers. That's one thing. The second thing, municipalities have a thing called LED, local economic development. The best thing we can do for stimulating local economic development is to look at your agricultural sector. This morning, I met the mayor of the West Coast District Municipality. I told him that 39% of all the people that are working in your district are working in the agricultural sector. And I'm so happy that we have now agreed that he is now going to host a West Coast agricultural show to bring everybody together, because this is to promote local economic development. I met another man this morning, Professor Mani Spama. We're going to have on the 24th, 25th of October next year, the biggest Karoo agricultural show in Laingsburg, talking about Laingsburg early this morning. So we are here to support farmers, small-scale farmers, but critical, particularly for small-scale farmers, biosecurity. I am not going to bend backwards for biosecurity. Everybody is going to make sure that we implement strict biosecurity regulatory frameworks, because I don't want to see, in many cases, we are free from some of these other animal diseases in the rest of the country. And that is because of the regulatory environment, and we will enforce it, especially when you transport livestock and animals. We have issued instructions to our traffics at the weighbridges. You will be stopped. You will be checked. But also, as Frans said, biosecurity starts at the level of the farm. And there is the place where we need to make sure that we protect our industry at the farm level. So biosecurity for us is very important, and support that we are getting from the commercial farmers, particularly in support of our small-scale farmers. Lastly, we also encourage, we have information days, particularly for our small-scale farmers, and information shows. But everything must start at the school level. That's why ons het ook saam met Agri Weskaap en Agri Expo ook jaarliks Westelike Provinsie Jeugskou, sodat kinders ook 'n liefde kan hê vir diere en ook 'n liefde vir dieregesondheid. So ons doen alles in samewerking met ons bedryf, en hier is 'n goeie wisselwerking tussen die regering en ons landbousektor in die Weskaap.
Richard, as a commercial producer, we're talking about support. What kind of support do you need from industry bodies, role players, local government? What do producers need to thrive?
Well, I think we've touched on the veterinary services and the support there from an export point of view, controls, disease management, etc. I think from the commodity-based organizations, Envy Coffee, National Wool Growers Association, as well as the Red Meat Producers Organization, specifically first on the wool, your responsible wool standards, participation program, where you make declarations, you farm sustainably and responsibly and humanely with the animals. These kind of programs are currently bringing producers about a 7% higher realization on their wool sales, which is fantastic. So encourage the producers to get involved in those sort of programs, which are great. On the meat side, I think market information, tendencies, etc., that producers can plan better and look at expanding their productions on the meat side. There are obviously a lot of, if we talk about in a Western Cape context, there are various breeds that are farmed within in the extensive areas that are only meat producing. They don't produce wool, or not clipped for their wool. And there is possibly opportunity with the expansion of the market, and if we see higher prices for people to convert from a meat type to a dual purpose type, and start producing wool as well. And these sort of market tendencies and projections are important, and die vraag en aanbod situasie wat vleis en die aanvraag vir wol vorentoe.
Ons het tog so 10 minute oor. Ek wil gou eers 'n geleentheid gee uit die gehoor uit vir vrae, en dan kan ons 'n bietjie van julle gedagtes saamvat aan die einde. Any questions from our audience?
Slaap julle? Daar's iemand. Dankie.
Ek het nie 'n vraag eintlik nie. My naam is John Durr van die Rooi Vleisprodusente Organisasie in die Wes-Kaap. Minister Meyer het 2 syfers genoem. Getalle nasionaal 18 miljoen plus minus. Ons weet nie. Sedert die regulering weet ons nie hoeveel skape is in Suid-Afrika nie. 12% uit die Wes-Kaap uit. Dit is ook plus minus reg. En dan nou oor na meneer Verhuisteen. 2014 het die Wes-Kaap so 20% van die land se skape geslag. Noord-Kaap het altyd die meerderheid, die ander is verdeel tussen die ander. Die laaste 2 jaar het die mark drasties geskuif na die Wes-Kaap toe. Dat ons nou baie naby aan 30% slag en die Noord-Kaap nog altyd so 32%. So iets het gebeur in die Wes-Kaap se abattoirbedryf. Ons weet van abattoirs wat hulle standaarde opgestoot het en minister Meyer het gesê van 'n abattoir wat 1300 kliënte het waar hy sy diere werf. Hy werf daai diere uit ander provinsies uit. Noord-Kaap, Oos-Kaap, bietjie in die Vrystaat. So daai diere kom hiernatoe, hy word hier geslag, so hy word deel van Wes-Kaap se produksie. Ons produksie is dus plus minus 30% van die land, maar ons diere is net 12%. So daar kan die ekonome 'n som maak. Wat is aan die gebeur? Dis positief vir die provinsie. Al word die diere hier geslag, is werkverskaffing, die 5de kwart bly hier, en die karkas kan skuif oor die hele land. Dit is goedkoper om 'n karkas te skuif as om 'n lewendige skaap te skuif en baie minder risiko's. Dan, dis ook interessant, die 15% rakspasie van lamsvleis. Sedert COVID en dan nou veral begin van die jaar, is dit baie onrusbarend om in 'n winkel te kom en te sien, daar lê min skaapvleis op die rakke. En vir my as 'n verbruiker, as ek in 'n winkel inkom en die rakke is leeg, dan vra ek 2 vrae, of ek het 2 gedagtes, of die produk loop goed, of daar is 'n probleem. En op die oomblik het ons 'n probleem by die verbruiker, en ons weet, ons het dit al baie bespreek vanoggend, dat die verbruiker kry swaar, maar ons almal wat hier sit is verbruikers. Elke man op sy eie, so dit is 'n uitdaging, wat nie sommer oornag gaan weggaan nie. En dan die laaste ene, wat ook hier gesê is vanoggend, wat werklik onrusbarend is die ondersteuningsstelsels. As daai dokter lees se pos nie vinnig gevul gaan word nie, en daar kom 'n leemte in die bedryf, dan kan dit lei tot onwettige invoere of ongekontroleerde invoere in ons provinsie. Die diere kom van ons buurlande, hy moet net na 'n goedgekeurde abattoir of 'n voerkraal gaan. Maar as dit nie gekontroleer word nie, dan kan dit versprei in ons kuddes, dis diere siektes, ons het geen beheer daaroor nie. So dit is definitief 'n ding wat moet, minister, na vandag, dit is al op hoë vlak deur die RPO bespreek, maar Dr. Lees se pos mag nie ongevul gelaat word nie, asseblief. Baie dankie.
Enige terugvoer van ons paneellede?
Ja,
Steven.
die eerste vraag, John.
John,
Ja, John, die eerste gedeelte van jou vraag, baie relevant. Ek dink ek gaan dit probeer eenvoudig hou. Die droogte, oor die periode wat jy dan verwys, die 8 jaar, het 'n dramatiese impak gehad op kudde-getalle in die Noord-Kaap. Julle is baie gelukkig in die Wes-Kaap. Met weidings met voorsiening en dan die abattoir spesifiek het 'n groter kapasiteitsbenutting in deurset gehad. Ek dink dis die verskil. Ek het nou net gesê ons het oor daai periode wat jy na verwys het ons die abattoirs in die Noord-Kaap het gehalveer van 56 na 26 toe. So dit was die een impak geweest. Die droogte het 'n groot impak gehad. Daar's areas waar KLK abattoir gehad het wat ons nou gesluit het. Calvinia, Ramskop abattoir. Moet eenvoudig nie getalle nie. Waar ons vorige jare of in die verlede 120.000 diere kon slag per jaar, het ons nie diere nie. Ons kry nie 40.000 geslag nie. So dis die realiteit. As jy gaan kyk omliggend om Calvinia, en jy kyk na die Wollaston en Carnarvon gebiede, dan is die veegetalle bestaan nie meer nie. En die kuddegetalle wat daar nog is miskien 30%. So ons het so gaan huiswerk doen en gaan kyk. So dit het 'n dramatiese impak gehad. Jou vraag oor die rakspasie wat ek na verwys het vroeër, jy is heeltemal reg. Jy stap in. Ek weet ons voorsien van die kettingwinkels direk via iemand in die Wes-Kaap. Ons kom in van die kettingwinkels in met verwerking. Maar as jy kyk na die vraag, hoe gereeld, in die verlede, net hierdie opmerking, Annelie, in die verlede het jy 'n koerant oopgemaak en jy sou sien, jy sou sien die kleinhandel het doen 'n spesiale promosie op maandeinde van lam. Ek het lanklaas so iets gesien, baie lanklaas. So die prysstrategie in die kleinhandel het verander. Hulle marge het ook verander. Ons het vroeër daarna verwys. Die marges het ook verander. Die gaping tussen die produsent en die kleinhandel, daai margeverandering het vergroot. Daar was 'n studie gedoen by die Universiteit van die Vrystaat 'n paar jaar gelede deur Pieter Taljaard en nog 'n persoon en dit het presies die gapingvergroting het dit aangespreek. So ek het nie kritiek teen die proses nie. Ek dink dis die realiteite wat ons moet aanspreek. Maar as jy vinniger prysverhogings deurgee as wat jy prysverlagings deurgee, het dit 'n impak op hierdie baie sensitiewe hoë waarde. Dis dalk nie 'n nismark meer nie. Dis net 'n baie duur. Ries het gesê dis 'n nismark. Ek hou ook daarvan. Ek hou van 'n lamchop. En dis 'n nisproduk en dis heerlik. Maar dis 'n hoë waarde. So ek dink dis van die kernaspekte die retail ondersteun nie meer die lam nie. Hulle hou hom konstant, dis wat hulle vir my gesê het op 'n stadium. Hulle het nie meer 'n prysstrategie om en ons is so siklies. Ek het nou net verwys na die ketting. So ons het nie 'n skaapvoerkraal wat jou abattoir voorsien wat jy kon konstant op die rak wees nie. So jy gaan met die siklusse deur. En dis van die uitdagings wat ons hier hoop bied. Ek hoop ek antwoord dit.
Nog 'n vraag?
Goeiemiddag baie. Dankie en lekker om hier te wees en dankie vir die geleentheid om dan kommentaar te lewer. En ek wil dan vir meneer Kriege die vrese besweer. Ek is Dr. Ilse Trautman, ek is die adjunkt-direkteur-generaal by die Departement van Landbou, ook verantwoordelik vir veeartsenykundige dienste. Dr. Lees se pos is vir ons uiters belangrik. So belangrik dat die pos al reeds geadverteer is. Die kortlysting is al gedoen, ons sal onderhoude binne die volgende maand doen. Ons is ook besig om Dr. Lees op kontrak aan te stel. Ongelukkig kan ons nie in die staat meer so maklik kontrakaanstellings doen nie vanweë redes wat jy almal sal weet. Dit is 'n formele proses en ons het daardie proses reeds aan die gang gesit. Die gedagte is om Dr. Lees dan op 'n jaarkontrak aan te stel om die nuwe persoon groot te maak. Ons het nie die geleentheid gehad of die luukse in die staat om wanneer 'n persoon dan gereed maak vir aftrede, dadelik iemand anders in daardie pos te kry nie, want daar is net een pos. So wees bewus daarvan, maar ons doen alles in ons vermoë en ons hoop om baie gou en baie vinnig dan eintlik 2 persone gereed te hê om voort te gaan. In terme van ons Milnerton uitvoerkantoor, minister het genoem dat ons doen 2600 uitvoerpermitte per maand. Nou as ons op 30 dae 'n maand werk, dan kan jy uitwerk hoeveel ons per dag moet doen. Die span werk onverpoost. Die kantore het so 'n bietjie uit hulle nate gebars en om daardie rede skuif die kantoor van Milnerton na Roelandstraat, groter kantore, meer effektief, minder blootgestel aan load shedding. Dit was die probleem maandag toevallig met daardie uitvoer. Ons Telkomlyn was af en ons het load shedding gehad. So ons het 'n dubbele slag gehad en daar was geen manier dat ons kontak met die uitvoerders kon hê nie. Maar ons probeer alles in ons vermoë om 24 uur 7 dae 'n week stelsel en 'n netwerk in plek te sit vir ons uitvoerders en hopelik met die nuwe groot Rolandstraat kantoor gaan ons baie meer effektief wees. So ons is daar en soos hulle sê ons is op dit. Baie dankie.
Dankie vir die terugvoer.
Dankie.
As ek ook nog 'n vraag net kan ingooi hierso, in terme van dieregetalle, een van die programme waarop ek werk, praat ons baie met opkomende boere. En baie van hulle het gediversifiseerde boerderye. Maar baie van hulle sê, vanweë waar hulle boer, sal hulle nie met skape boer nie, want veediefstal is nog steeds vir hulle so groot uitdaging. Hoe ondervind ons, is there any progress in terms of addressing stock theft?
Ja, dit is 'n ernstige probleem. Want ons het gesien dat boere, veral klein boere, het aan ons gerapporteer dat daar is verskillende vorme van diefstal op hulle plase, maar die grootste item is gewoonlik maar lewende hawe. En ons het ook in samewerking met Agri-Weskaap, as ook met die Suid-Afrikaanse polisie, het ons ook 'n landelike veiligheidsstrategie daar gestel. Ons het ook gekyk na spesifiek oor, ons het navorsing laat doen, om te kyk waar vind dit plaas, watter tyd van die dag, wat word gesteel, hoekom word dit gesteel, wat is die profiel van die persoon. Want wanneer jy daardie navorsing het, kan jy dan jou hulpbronne dan sodanig daar stel. Maar die plan wat ons ook in werking gestel het, is plaasbuurtwagte. Ek sien ook hier by Nampo, hier buite het ek 'n paar tegnologie gesien wat ook boere help om dit te voorkom. Dit word ook hier plaaslik uitgestal by Nampo hier in Bredasdorp. Maar dit is bly 'n probleem en daarom het ons ook intensief gekyk na veediefstal. Ek is baie bly om te sê dat ek het gesien dat Agri-Weskaap het so 'n jaar of 2 gelede ook erkenning gegee aan die veediefstal eenheid van die Suid-Afrikaanse polisie en ons het goeie vordering gesien veral daar in die Beaufort Wes omgewing van die probleem waarvan jy praat is wyd versprei, maar is ook daar in die sentrale Karoo ernstige probleem, maar saam met ons landelike veiligheidseenhede, ons buurtwagte, plaasbuurtwagte, ons lei hulle ook op en dit is ook maar 'n ding wat al die boere saam moet bestuur en ek is bekommerd daaroor, maar ons het navorsing gedoen, ons het stelsels in plek, want 'n persoon wat steel op 'n plaas of 'n boer vermoor, vir my is dit ekonomiese misdaad. En wanneer jy jou ekonomie aanval, en ons het gesien wat is die omvang van die ekonomie, is dit die taak van die regering om in te gryp. En ek is bly om te sê dat ek kry baie goeie samewerking. Ek het ook 'n interministeriële komitee in die lewe geroep oor landelike veiligheid. Ek is die voorsitter van daardie komitee en ek kry goeie samewerking en terugvoering oor die landbousektor. Maar die kleinboere, hulle kla gereeld daaroor en dis 'n ernstige probleem. Byvoorbeeld in Maritzburg het ek vir die kleinboere gesê, julle nou moet organiseer in Maritzburg, want dit is nou blykbaar 'n groot probleem in daardie omgewing.
Ek wil 'n opmerking maak daar. They say prevention is better than cure. But once again, that places the onus on farmers to invest in prevention of something they have very little control over. And then a part of that preventative effort is taking back control. But until we start seeing prosecutions and convictions and people serving time for these crimes, the problem is not going to go away. Is there progress there?
Yes. So for that, we have established a thing called a court watching brief. Court watching brief is say when people are caught for theft, or particularly worse, for farm attacks or farm murders. I don't want to hear as the Minister of Agriculture that the docket has disappeared. There's no conviction. So as a result of the court watching brief, we have now, for example, in the Cape Winelands many years ago, found one person guilty, sentenced, and convicted 58 years in prison, double life sentence, and in Namakoland sê hulle, sy gat gaan nie weer son sien nie. So for us, that's the way we want to see it. So we do follow it, and I get a regular report back from the court watching brief, what happened to a case, where's the case in the criminal justice system, because I want to see justice. And I went to court, I've been to court, and I oppose bail. So I take this rule of safety very serious because I want my farmers to farm. I don't want my farmers to be a police inspector. It's not their job, because the moment he turns his energy away from farming, he's losing money, because that's the job, the first job of a government is to protect the citizens, and farmers are citizens of this country. And I want my farmers to spend all the time on farming. But the way it is now, farmers spend about 20% on finding alternative energy, your previous discussion. They spend 30% on looking at the safety of their farm. So 50% of their time is not on the business of farming, and we're losing valuable agricultural production energy into agriculture. A farmer, by the way, today is no more a farmer. A farmer is first and foremost, today in South Africa, the farmer is the mayor of the town. Water, electricity, sewage, housing, energy, that's the job of a mayor. So farmers have actually become mayors on a town.
Thank you very much. I'm going to give a last opportunity for any questions, and then we're going to wrap. Here's one yes in the front. Thank you.
Middag aan die paneel en die debat van die SAFAM groep. Jy weet, om die uitvoere te begin is baie geld aan die traceability, soos wat ons genoem het, in die stelsels wat by die boere begin en by die uitvoere eindig. As siektes soos back and claw seer gebeur, dan val die hele stelsel plat vir baie keer 'n groot aantal maande. En ek het net gewonder watse uitdagings sal ons hê as ons byvoorbeeld kyk na die Weskaap waar ons is en in die lig gesien dat die Weskaap en die Noord-Kaap nog nooit back and claw seer gehad het nie. En as daar kwarantyne kom, hoekom kan die Weskaap en die Noord-Kaap dan nie uitgesluit word daarvan nie? Is dit 'n moeilike prosedure? Hoekom kan dit nie gedoen word nie?
I would like to respond to that. I'm a student of public administration. I don't attend any meeting in government without the Constitution. And I look carefully at the Constitution. Schedule 5 of the Constitution describe veterinary services as an exclusive provincial legislative competence. And I've asked my department to look into our capacity to develop and draft our own Western Cape provincial veterinaire wetgewing. Ek is baie bly in die regering kan jy nie net 'n wet skryf nie, jy moet eers 'n bietjie navorsing doen, jy moet beleidsagtergronde doen en ek is baie bly Dr. Ilse Trautman, my hoof van daardie afdeling, het my so onlangs van 'n dokument voorsien. Ek het vir die Wes-Kaapse regering gesê, hier is my intensie om 'n provinsiale wetgewing op die wetboek te stel, want die grondwet gee my daardie mandaat. Nergens in Suid-Afrika het enige provinsie in die afgelope 30 jaar daai wetgewende bevoegdheid opgeneem nie, want dit is 'n wet, 'n eksklusiewe provinsiale wetgewende mandaat. Met ander woorde, uitsluitlik vir 'n provinsie. En binne hierdie argitektuur van hierdie wetgewing wil ons presies kyk na daardie aspekte wat u aangespreek het, want ek is baie bekommerd dat wanneer daar siektes is in 'n ander provinsie, hoekom moet ons ook daardeur geaffekteer word? So, dit is 'n gesprek, daar is beleidsdokumentasie. Die Weskaap het ook nou tans 'n provinsiale magtewetsontwerp op die tafel geplaas. Een van daar is 5 tipe funksies. For example, trade, harvest, export, policing, and then public transport. I added the 6th one. Veterinary services. I made a submission, and I will appear before an ad hoc committee in Parliament, fighting for exactly what you are asking for.
Uitstekend. Ek dink op daardie noot gaan ons die gesprek afsluit. Ek wil vir die paneellede vreeslik baie dankie sê. Thank you so much for your participation, for sharing your knowledge. Now I can tell my parents I know a little bit more about sheep than just eating a chop. Baie dankie vir julle almal wat bygewoon het. Dankie vir ons gehoor aanlyn.